You describe in the book one big break in the case. And
Yep.
let me read the sentence and then have you explain exactly what that big break is. But the sentence is too good not to read. You say that we just broken the case wide open, all because of Donald Trump being a cheap, predatory asshole who doesn't pay his bills. How is it that those tendencies in Donald Trump gave you guys the big break in the case?
He doesn't pay his vendors. And we're not just talking about like, okay, his bank loans or whatever, where, if a bank gives a loan, there's always a possibility that the business will go under and not be able to repay the loan. That's part of the risk the bank takes on. If you're providing carpet for the business, yeah, it could go under, but you're expecting that you delivered the carpet and installed it. You're expecting that you're going to get paid. Trump, when he shuts down a business, even though he owns it and it's through and with the Trump organization and the money that it has, rather than say, okay, we're going to pay off all of the existing bills and then we're going to shut the lights off, he just stops paying for everything and shuts the lights off. He fires everybody, and then any existing bills that are still outstanding at that point, he just refuses to pay them, or he'll pay them like 30 cents on the dollar. And that's a common, really shady business practice that's incredibly predatory, especially to small businesses. All the talk about him being a champion for the common people is complete and utter bullshit, because every time that he has had the opportunity to do right by a lot of folks or not, he has chosen to screw them over and over and over again, and he's been doing it for decades. But this is also one of his weaknesses, because it means that he makes a lot of enemies. And if you can tap into that dynamic, it can really, really help. So what happened here was that the very vendor that had done the transcriptions of the tapes, they were probably audio files, but you know what I mean. We like saying tapes still. There were tapes from Trump University of what was going on. These were going to corroborate our whole case, hopefully, is what we thought. If the victims were saying, I was lied to about this, the instructors told me these things, and then we were able to corroborate it through transcripts, it would break open the whole case. So we were trying really hard to get those. They were our primary target. We couldn't get them. It took us months to track this guy down, get a hold of him. But I had an email, and he didn't want to cooperate. I got him on the phone. He didn't want to cooperate. But I did have one other card to play, which was that I had an email from him, or exchange between him and Trump University, in which he was saying that he hadn't gotten paid for his final invoice for about $14,000. And when was he going to get that? I brought that up, and it was like I was having a conversation with a totally different person. It was just like, boom, total 180. All of a sudden, he started talking. He started being a lot more open and engaged. It was a lot like the victims that I had talked to on the consumer side. It was the same thing. He went and spoke for a few minutes, unbroken, about how they had never gotten paid. He'd asked over and over again, and it had actually been one of the sort of like moments that kind of tipped the business over into failing. He had to actually shut down that sort of back office business that he had created to help businesses with their back office needs. This guy had been screwed over just like the victims had. And once I brought that up, I just let him talk for a little bit. And finally, at the end of what he was saying, he said, look, I've got about 150 transcripts. Where do you want them? How do I get them to you? And that was it. That was the big missing piece that made everything, fit together. Everything, all the other pieces of evidence fit together after that.
So then you end up filing the case when?
The moment where we got those transcripts was probably the spring of 2012, winter or spring of 2012. We don't file until August of 2013. We got the green light to actually really like prepare it in about June or July of 2013.
What happens after you file the case, and how it is you move from filing the case to actually being able to settle the case?
We file the case. We have to deal with a motion to dismiss, of course, from Trump. We had a statute of limitations issue. That's a whole other topic, but there's a section in the book about playing the long game with the statute of limitations issues, which often can be very dry, but can really make a big difference in terms of your recovery of money in a big fraud case like this. The team on the appellate side that did that work did a masterful job. The case was held up because of that for quite a while. They won a huge victory in March of 2016, I believe, where we got an appellate court to say that there was a 6-year statute of limitations for the law in question. Now, that's actually relevant for today. It's the same statute, Executive Law 6312, that is at issue in the massive $370 million civil fraud case that the New York AG has pending against Trump now that just finished trial. And we're going to be hearing a lot more about that statute and how it gets applied, especially at the appellate level in the next year or so. But that's also a different story. But we won a big victory on that then, and that really set the table because at that point, our case was fully functional. We were going to be able to go after every nickel of that 42 million pretty much that Trump had taken from these people and that we were looking to recover. And it was then barreling forward toward trial in the spring, summer of 2016. He managed to get it delayed because of him running for president. And it got pushed off to November, December 2016. And that's then when he then won the 2016 election, it then set the stage for that settlement that we now all know about that occurred that was first announced in November of 16, right after the election. I had left the office by that point, so I was not part of the team that settled the matter. But what it did was it ended up returning over 90% of the money for people who put in a claim. It got them about 90% of their money back.
That is part of the happy ending, that you all and the office were able to get 90% of the money back for the victims of Trump's bullshit. Were you with the office when that initial offer was made to resolve the case?
Yes.
Because I found that, and let me spit it out, not to steal your thunder, but apparently you all, or maybe the higher up, settled on offering to make this case go away, settle it, resolve it for $2 million. Is that right?
Yes, that came from upstairs.
So even though there was more than $42 million of fraud that you all had uncovered. So to me, an old homicide guy, that would feel like, in a first-degree murder case, me offering the defendant to plead to littering while armed for leaving the dead body in the street. I mean,
right.
This is a bit of a reduced charge or a reduced settlement.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about what went into that and what, in your opinion, actually resulted in a far more advantageous settlement.
That kind of a lower dollar number in that world when you're doing like economic frauds, that's a number that you would get, and I say this in the book too, it's a number that you would get if you were if you got that number at the very beginning of the case so that you could declare a quick victory and go home. That's the kind of number that you would get. Let's just give a number and say we'll never do it again, and that's sometimes what happens in those. Given the number at stake, the 42 million, 2 million was was just a pittance. And effectively, it was signaling weakness to Trump. So what did Trump do? He said, nothing, zero. I'm giving you nothing. I'm not gonna counter. That was our opening offer, and we expect to get a counter offer. We got no, and we were expecting that maybe they were going to say, you know what, we'll pay you, 250 grand for this to go away. And we won't declare that we did anything wrong and blah, 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 blah. We thought that we were going to get that kind of thing back from them. We got nothing. It was basically like no response. We're not doing anything. Our client does not settle. And that ended up enraging Schneiderman, is what we heard from upstairs from the folks that were in the room, that it actually had the effect ultimately of causing him to say, you know what, let's go get them. We're going to go after them. If they won't talk, then we're going to bring this case. He used a little bit more colorful language than that. We got lucky, frankly, because I think that if we had ended up settling for pennies on the dollar, it would have been a travesty. And it almost happened. So the way I put it in the book is, we got rescued from our own mistake. We were willing to settle for way too little. And thankfully, Trump bailed us out. if he had been a little bit more clever, look, I think he was reading it interestingly. He was reading the notion that Eric Schneiderman didn't really want to bring this case. But for him to give nothing, really good negotiators know it's a well-received wisdom in this space. This is far from my idea. It's a well-received common wisdom that you want to give at least something to the other side so that they can save face. It's important to give them some kind of win. Even if you're going to win more and you want to win more, you want to give something to the other side. Throw them a bone. The fact that Trump didn't think that, if they just thrown us a bone, we probably would have gone away. And they didn't do that. He is so cheap and so stubborn and just so delusional about his own lack of culpability that he refused to negotiate at all, and he doomed himself. He could have gotten that case to go away for 1 million or less.
So in case anybody is still, laboring under the impression that he's a great negotiator, he probably could have resolved it for $1 million or $500,000, but he ended up having to pay out $25 million.
If he paid us that, he still would have needed to reckon with the private class action that was pending in parallel. That the $25 million settlement settled all of those cases. It was a global settlement, and the work that they did was also, very impressive and really moved the ball forward on a lot of stuff. I think that without our case, it would have been tougher for them to get where they went because of our subpoena power. Like, we had a power that they just didn't have. Like, it's those kind of cases in consumer protection are much stronger when they're brought by the government than they are by private parties. That's just the nature of the beast. I think the joint effort of everybody helped bring it to where it got. But yeah, it would never have made it if Trump had actually been better at being a negotiator. He's actually terrible at it.
Justice matters. Justice matters. Justice matters.